Okay, if we can get to the 3 mark. Okay. I think we're good. I think
we're good.
We are here together.
I will say, Caitlin, that the recording complications that we've had today, I think are emblematic of the way that the chapter 4 and chapter 5 work together in this amazing book. The first time you read it, you're like, wait, what's going on? What's happening? There's all this misdirection and stuff. And then the second time you read it, you're like, oh, this is just crazy. This is like just completely insane.
It just gets more complicated, even though you know what's happening. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
So let's dial back for people. Oh, hello. This is poirotpals, BTW.
Hello.
We are in the midst of the murder of Roger Ackroyd. We're about to go to the chapter titled Murder, but the murder has already happened in chapter 4, which is titled, what is it titled? Something about dinner.
It's the dinner at Fernley, I believe.
Perfect. So yeah, a very interesting and, as you said, kind of stabby little night. There's so much, and I think this is something I'll get into, especially in these next couple chapters, but there's so much putting on a play. There's so much play acting. You know, Shepard will be doing all these gestures. It's like we're moving through reality, but someone is also putting on a skit for us that we're unaware of. Like we're accidentally in Dr. Shepard's version of Punk'd, or like Smile, You're on Camera. And it first is just for us, and then it's for everyone else. And then you get all these other people putting on their own plays, their own little subterfuges. Like everything around us is false to a degree. And we're like wading through trying to figure out who's acting, who's not. And so I think that's where you kind of get that feeling, Chad, that you're like, everything is really chaotic. It's almost like if you're talking to a friend and something really big has happened to them and they're not telling you yet. And you're like, I was talking to my friend and everything seemed kind of normal. I didn't really question it, but now that I know all this information, I'm going back and being like, oh, that makes so much sense. That's why so-and-so was acting a little off. But like, it's just under the radar.
This is very illustrative of the difference between you and me, which is that you gave this beautiful, very empathetic description of like how the book feels concerning like a person that you know who you're thinking, okay, something's going on. And then once you find out, you're like, oh, that's what the – and what I was going to say is it's like a hat upon a hat, but it just looks like one hat.
Okay. Chad, I just want to ask when you've encountered a hat on a hat.
It's just a phrase I've been hearing all the time lately.
It's in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, it's like something that's superfluous, so it doesn't even hold up, right? Like in my thing, but that's what I was thinking of. It's just like a hat upon a hat, but it actually, God, at least just like one hat until you get closer. You're like, oh, there are two hats.
I just really like thinking that you surround yourself with people that conceal their hats.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All night, his head looked so weird.
So strange.
And then he took off his outer hat and it all made sense.
Right.
Cool. Well, I'm glad we've learned so much about ourselves. And we haven't even gotten to chapter 5, which is where we're technically supposed to be starting.
Oh, that's right. Yes. So I just have this little very brief intro kind of synopsis to like get us to the important stuff. Dr. Shepard returns to Fernley to examine Roger Ackroyd's corpse. He encounters Parker, the butler, at the front gate. Parker has no idea what Dr. Shepard is talking about. To his knowledge, Mr. Ackroyd is alive and well in the study. And then also Parker completely denies calling Dr. Shepard. So then Dr. Shepard says, I'm not going to leave until I know that Roger Ackroyd is alive.
That's the whole kind of magic of this chapter. Everybody trying to figure out what's going on. Shepherd knows what's happened, and he's actively changing the narrative and the crime scene as people are moving throughout the chapter and throughout the house, which is brilliant. His crime is only halfway committed right now, but he's going to use these little like paragraph breaks where we don't really know what's going on, time is passing, to actually complete his like staging of the crime scene.
He's really created a situation where he already knows what's happened, and therefore he's using the shock of everyone encountering the body to then cover up what he did.
He's the only one who knows about the tiny inner hat, is what you're saying.
Yeah. It's almost a psychological term, like the id, the ego, the superego, the top hat, the middle hat, and the tiny hat.
Wow. Okay. So let's see. The delightful and delicious thing about this chapter is just all of the wickedness. And I hope it doesn't get like too repetitive where you and I are like, oh my God, reread this passage again and you can see it in a totally different way. But like, I still feel that way every chapter I reread. I still get that feeling of excitement when I see how I've been fooled, and it doesn't get old. I'm not like, here we go again. Look at all the ways that we were deceived.
It's so darkly comic. Mm-hmm. Like when Shepherd says things like, it was definitely a murder. It was like, because he did it. It's so creepy and hilarious, kind of.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because there is a humor to this whole story that we talked about, you know, like with Caroline and just the exchanges that Shepherd has. It's funny. And like having those two tones and emotions going on at the same time, it harmonizes in this really specific and satisfying way.
None of this works if he's the town chimney sweep, right?
Yeah.
He's the doctor, and there's an imbalance between his power position and Parker's power, and frankly, almost anybody else's other than Ackroyd's. And Shepherd is the person you want to impress. He's the town physician. And so he's using that status to immediately put Parker on the defensive.
It's that like accusing people of exactly what you're doing. And then here we get right after that, he and Parker discover the body. Dr. Shepherd is like, tell Mr. Raymond, tell Major Blunt, which is so smart because he's like, go get these people, alert people that there's a problem. So he's not acting sketchy. He's doing exactly what you would do. It's be like, raise the house. And then we have this super creepy paragraph. Parker hurried away, still wiping his perspiring brow. I did what little had to be done. I was careful to not disturb the position of the body and not to handle the dagger at all. No object was to be attained by moving it. Ackroyd had clearly been dead for some time. So this is the moment where we get the dictaphone switcheroo. He puts it into his doctor's bag, which he's naturally carrying because he's the doctor, and then he pushes the chair back that he had pulled out to like hide that the dictaphone was there. It's just, I did what little had to be done. That's all the stuff that's happening in that sentence.
Yeah, it's incredible. And also, I'm pretty sure, I know that it didn't get published, but I know she was writing a sequel to this book that was called The Dictaphone Switcheroo. But they...
Deep cuts.
Deep cuts.
Okay, I love this too. So, like, Blunt comes in, Raymond comes in, and Shepherd is like, nothing must be moved. The police must see it exactly as he is now. Yes, that's true. It's also right because he's just moved a ton of things around. But he's also like, don't disturb my scene. I've set it up this way. Don't touch anything.
Yeah.
Something that I've been thinking about too is that like the thing that really A, just like makes the story interesting and keeps it going, but B, gives Shepherd challenges is these wild cards he didn't see coming. Like the mystery man, like Flora lying, and like Poirot. Had everything gone according to his calculations without these outside forces, he would have totally gotten away with it.
Oh, I agree.
And he also uses many times, both with the police and then later when we get Poirot, who is 2 chapters away still from being involved in this, he uses the descriptor carefully a lot when he's like, oh, the police are asking me to tell my story. I told it to them carefully. He does that a lot with Poirot too. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, obviously he would tell it carefully because he respects the police. He doesn't want to mess everything up. But it's like, no, 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 no. He was making sure his narrative was like completely flawless. Again, and I think we'll bring this back up because Poirot brings it up later. He's always like, oh, you're just like Hastings. We accept it even more because we're used to a narrator that's so passionate about solving crimes. And we never really stop to think, why does Shepherd care so much? Really? He's bought in a little too much.
Right when you would probably be thinking, why the heck are we hearing this story from this man's perspective? Poirot comes on board and starts to kind of confide in him, and then he makes those he talks about him being Dr. Shepherd being the new Hastings. And then immediately you're like, oh, great, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I remember Hastings.
Yeah.
This is how this happens.
Yeah, we're not even like in the book, in the story there. We are into the series. And she's like using the series and what she's established in our expectations against us.
Yeah.
The one thing that I wanted to point out is that they ask Flora to tell her story, but they just say there's a robbery. They don't tell her that her uncle has died because they're like, she wouldn't be able to handle it. And then Blunt, I mean, we'll get into Blunt, but at least he is true to his name there. And he tells Flora, look, your uncle is actually dead. And of course she faints. Then Shepherd gets to also like be in a caring role really quickly. Like he has even more of a purpose to be here. Like he's helping investigate the crime. He's taking care of the fainting ladies, which we've already established happens pretty much all the time too. But then he like hurries back downstairs. He's like, Flora, you're good? Cool. Okay. I'm going back downstairs. And we can guess that he does that too because he's like, oh, I must be needed. You know, I'm just helping like kind of triage this emergency situation when actually he's like, no, I want to still like, I literally need to control the narrative and control the scene. So I have to go back downstairs.
You're reading it the first time thinking this guy understands his importance. He has to, he's helped Flora. He's almost like a jack of all trades. Like now he has to go talk to the police again because he, you know, he's also a doctor and he can look at, it's really interesting.
Before we go to chapter 6, Chad, you had what Oprah calls an aha moment about Flora and her motivation for lying and how actually everyone is kind of being dumb.
Flora lies about something that creates even more opportunity for Dr. Shepherd to seemingly get away with this. She probably wouldn't have just told that lie had the police officer just been honest, and then that would have made it much easier to solve. So I guess that's really impressive that like it's in there because it seems totally believable.
That's such a nice thing, too, about how she weaves together, you know, in all of her mysteries. But in this one, you know, Poirot is always saying, and we'll get to it because we don't have Poirot involved yet. He's like, everyone here is lying. The mystery is finding out who is lying about something important, who's lying about something that's not important. And the way she's able to play the lies off of each other to corroborate things that don't exist, to like obscure the truth. I don't even know how you would begin to come up with it, but it's very impressive. Let's go to something that is also impressive. The Tunisian dagger, chapter 6.
Dr. Shepherd manipulates the police into suspecting Parker, the butler. We learn that the dagger used to murder Roger Ackroyd was a gift to him from Major Blunt.
Pretty much that is the heart of this chapter. I had subtitled it, Let's Suspect Parker and Make Everyone Else Look Shady, which is kind of, you know, like we're really putting the spotlight on Parker, but everyone else kind of incriminates themselves too. The police officer we're working with now is Inspector Davis, and we'll get 2 others later on, but really this is like Davis's show right now. And he is not a superior by any means. He's like the dude who's called out. And so you'll kind of see how this will determine where Davis kind of aligns himself later when like other people are put into play. There's kind of like a power play there. And this is another one of like Shepherd. He lies, but in a way that makes him seem so humble and so actually so concerning. Shepherd says, "I made an instant decision. You might as well have it out now." It's this beautiful misdirection where he concedes a little bit. He's like, "Look, I lied to you, but now I want to get everything off my chest," which makes him seem so much more trustworthy. It's like, oh, he feels so bad about lying, but he can't even keep it in. How could he be lying even more? It's so interesting. He says, "I told Davis the story I've just put down here." So he doesn't say, "I told the truth." He says,
right.
"I recounted everything I've put in this journal or book or account so far." So super sneaky, super tricky. Shepherd weaves the conversation, weaves the suspicion toward Parker. He's like, Ackroyd was suspicious of someone in the household. Parker is snooping about. He also does this it's great because he also makes himself kind of all over the place, which I think is so smart. Like, if you're going to lie about something and withhold the truth from people, he doesn't stick to like one story. He is also being like, well, what about this? What about this? Oh, no, wait, it couldn't have happened this way because of this. So, he's like, maybe it was Parker, but then he's like, no, there's this weird time gap. If Parker had killed Ackroyd right after I left, why would he have waited? Because like the murder timing doesn't work. We know, right, quote unquote, know that Ackroyd was alive for another half hour. Obviously he was already dead, but he's like, why would he wait? Like, we have to kind of rule Parker out. He makes himself seem more credible by going back and forth kind of along with everyone, mirroring and imitating what someone would do if they were actually trying to figure something out genuinely, yes, as opposed to being like, it was Ralph the whole time. It was Ralph. He never says it's Ralph, which is just like, he's like a little spider weaving a web, Yeah. He like subtly draws people there, but never saying it out loud. Okay, so yeah, so much subterfuge. They go over the mysterious man, and this is just so delightful too, because like Dr. Shepherd is obviously very confused by the mysterious man, and it like makes everything super chaotic, super unpredictable for him. And so it's interesting to know that there and with Flora, he's like genuinely confused as well, which like kind of works to his advantage, because he's like I have no fucking clue who this guy is. Like, I don't know where he came from, but he's having to like really improv as he goes and like build things into this very tight made up story that he's created about what happened.
Yeah. And
then the last thing, I mean, the title is The Tunisian Dagger. It's so funny because like the dagger just doesn't even really matter in the grand scheme of things. But the thing that I love is that Inspector Davis is like, come here, Dr. Shepherd, let's look at the knife. He just takes the knife and he literally just like pulls it out of Ackroyd, which I just feel like, I mean, I know he's representative of the law. It just seems a little cavalier. No one else is around. All these other like inspectors are supposed to come. He just pulls it out of the body. And the best part is he takes a random mug off the mantelpiece and just puts it in there. And like, if you're just like, what? Who? Where? Why do we think this is okay? But in this moment, he says something interesting that is super smart of Agatha Christie. He's like, this knife is so sharp, it could, quote, a child could drive that into a man as easy as cutting butter. So the sharpness of the knife, how that helps Christie is it keeps all the women in the story open as suspects. Like, it wasn't a difficult murder. And I put, well, women cannot dig graves, they can definitely cut butter. Which is the rule of the Poirot universe and what women can and cannot do.
That is fantastic.
Okay, but in this moment, Shepard just gives this totally phony, like, inspection of the crime. And he's like, from what I imagine, Ackroyd was stabbed from behind and he never saw his attacker. And so it's just a bunch of theater. But ultimately, both Shepard and Raymond give Inspector Davis their fingerprints because they see, and this is kind of funny, like, poor Inspector Davis, like, Inspector Davis is one of the only ones who really trusts Poirot, so we have to be on his side. But he's also a bit silly until then, but he's, like, endearing, and he, like, wants to do right, and he's a not smart Poirot, you know? Like,
right.
Like, we can see his goals, but he hasn't quite gotten there. So he's talking to Parker, and he's, like, trying to get the fingerprints. So he's like, Parker, come look at this address book, and is, like, really making sure that Parker, like, touches the address book with his fingers. Right. So it's, like, really obvious. So Raymond is kind of an asshole here, and he's like, you know what, so he, like, gets these cards, he wipes them down, they take their fingerprints, and they label it Dr. Shepard, Raymond, and they just hand it to Davis, kind of like, we saw what you were doing there, and we'll save you some trouble, which is, like, kind of a dick move.
No, it is.
Poor Davis. He's so sincere.
Yeah.
He's so sincere, and he's just not there yet. So just all the interesting things. Shepard is just, like, particularly in this chapter, he's like dodging bullets left and right, or it's like a really complex fight scene or something with many assailants, but it's like all these people trying to figure out what happened. He's having to, like, bat them away and be like, I'm going to act this way, this, like, for this person, I'm going to say this for this person. Actually, seeing this from his perspective sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
You know, they're going over the knife. We learn, as you said, that it was a gift from Blunt from Tunisia. We learn that the knife was in the silver table, and they're trying to figure out, like, when was the knife taken? Like, and it doesn't really matter. So we bring in Mrs. Russell, who is the housekeeper, also was possibly a love interest of Ackroyd for a while until the woman he actually fell in love with kind of came along. So there are questions surrounding her right now. They're like, do you remember when you saw the knife in the silver table? And she's just like, I don't know. And she just, like, leaves. And so this makes everyone suspicious, but she's distracted because she doesn't really care because she's got this whole other thing going on with her son that no one knows about yet.
Yeah, that's very true. To speak to the thing that you're saying about understanding how harrowing this must be for Dr. Shepard, there's the part where he makes the decision to tell the inspector that he heard the lid close. And that's a big risk on his part. To say, like, I noticed the difference between this and the way that the window sounded or whatever. He has to cover that base. It's really interesting the way he interjects it. Because I think it even, like, for a second, like, the inspector's like,
what?
That's an interesting thing, right?
Because, yeah, like, when he enters the home pre-murder, it's just the night of a dinner party. He's already planning the murder, obviously. But he goes in with so much caution, which is also so weird. Like, we're expecting a murder to happen. So we're like, any clue, this is an Agatha Christie story. It makes sense that he hears a weird sound and he pauses and focuses on it. And there's this sense of anticipation. In any other normal circumstance, that would be like, I hear so many weird sounds all the time and I don't care. Yeah. And so that shows that he has, like, this heightened sense. And it was Mrs. Russell, right, who shut the lid as she was leaving the room?
Yes.
And, like, she went out the window because she was going to go meet her son, right?
I think so.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. We'll find out. We'll find out when we get there. So you're right. Like, he is revealing that he had a heightened sense of what was happening in the house. And that's weird.
Yeah.
Parker is the main suspect in this chapter. We're getting suspicious of him, but everybody else is a little sketchy too. So we have Blunt is the one who gifted the daggers, or, like, is something going on there. We have Mrs. Russell just not really caring and leaving. And then we get Jeffrey Raymond, who is like just really youthful, driven, and kind of too positive and efficient for a murder. Is that just his personality?
It's just his personality.
Okay,
he is,
cool.
Yeah, he's like, over the 2 years that he's been Ackroyd's secretary, he has just impressed everyone.
So we never have like he's just like, I'm a go-getter. Because I'm trying to remember what his lie is. Maybe he doesn't have a lie. We'll find out, which is going to be my catchphrase for this series. But so everybody's kind of like, that's a little weird. Like, why is he so energetic? Shepherd kind of gives us this contrast that gives us this tiny window into exactly what you and I have been talking about like how stressful and frazzled he must actually be.
Yes.
So Shepherd tells us youth is very buoyant. Even the brutal murder of his friend and employer could not dim Jeffrey Raymond's spirits for long. Perhaps that is as it should be. I do not know. I have lost the quality of resilience long since myself. Wow. Then we get a new paragraph. It was very late when I got back. So he's exhausted. This man is a man about town that night. He's gone back and forth so many trillions of times. He has done things out in the open. He's done things covertly. He's had to deal with this chaotic household twice in one night, all the while trying to like completely fool everyone. He goes home. He's hoping that Caroline is in bed, and the last person he has to deal with and also like hide things from is Caroline. She's waiting for him up at home with Cocoa. And I think as of now, Cocoa has been mentioned so many times that it should be like an official drink of Poirot Pals. Yes. You know, if we're doing a like a pre-read and we're like, we don't know if there's an appropriate beverage or whatever, we default is hot cocoa. Everybody's drinking cocoa. Poirot loves cocoa. We love Caroline. She loves cocoa. That's our go-to.
It definitely.
Yeah, and so he's like, oh, Jesus. Like, here's Caroline. She's like, out of everyone so far, she's the smartest. So he should be the most scared of her, and I think he is.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, oh my God, this murder, blah, da, 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 da. He says, I contented myself with giving her the facts of the murder. And he's like, the police suspect Parker, and I'm about to go to bed. It seems pretty clear it's Parker. And Caroline is like, no, absolutely not. That inspector must be a perfect fool. Parker indeed. Don't tell me. So she's just like, everybody is so dumb. She is, as of now, his main opponent in terms of like intelligence. But as we see in chapter 7, I learned my neighbor's profession. She's about to get one-upped by Poirot.
That chapter could also be titled Dr. Shepherd has a very private panic attack when he realizes that the world famous detective lives in town. Yeah.
So I think what we'll do is, because we had to do a lot of orienting for ourselves, for you, not for Poirot or for Shepherd. Shepherd is too oriented, I feel. We had to figure out what was going on. We're going to pause here, and then with high anticipation, or highly anticipated, we're anticipating things. Poirot will enter the scene again, but as the detective, not the vegetable marrow chucker.
Right. In the parlance of this episode, him being a detective is the hat upon the hat of him being a gardener.
He's about to take off his big sun hat and reveal his detective hat.
Yes, so that is the next episode. We will see Poirot in action for the first time in this book. Okay, yes, see everybody next episode. Debrief number 3.
Bring your hats. Your secret hat and your public hat, and we'll compare.
And don't forget the tiny hat.
Don't forget the teeny tiny hidden hat. Okay.
All right. Talk to you soon. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.